I am David Sobransky. This is Financial Revelations. Welcome back. As always, you can reach out to us on Twitter at skibucks1. You can email us, Joshua at epsf.com. You can call us, 1-800-344-2534, 1-800-344-2534. And you can listen to us on the radio every Thursday morning, WCRF 103.3 Moody Radio, Thursdays at 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. And if you're a technophant, and you are because you're listening to this podcast, you could actually get the Moody app and listen to us anywhere in the world. So we have people listening to us from South America, from California, Hawaii, Alaska, all over the country, and I encourage you to do that. You can even call in and text in your questions on Moody Radio Thursdays from 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. Well, you know what? I hate to say I told you so, but I did tell you so. The first quarter GDP, gross domestic product, was minus 1.9%. The second quarter gross domestic product, GDP, was minus 0.9%, and that is the technical definition of a recession. So we are in what some people are terming the Biden recession. Remember, the Biden administration came into power January 22nd, I think, of 2021. They got elected in 2020. They had a booming economy coming out of COVID. They had a vaccine. They had a couple of vaccines coming out of COVID. And so things were looking really good. And essentially, they spent a lot of money into an economy that was trying to recover with supply constraints and created an inflationary environment. And that is really taking its toll on the economy right now. And that is, now I want to say for the record that I don't blame the Biden administration 100% for inflation, but I do blame them about 75% for inflation. Now, in a broader sense, some stuff still has yet to crack in the economy. And if that does happen, I do think that we'll go into a broader based recession. And I think we are going there sometime next year. So the third quarter, you may see a positive GDP. It's quite possible, especially because gas prices have retreated a little bit. So it's possible. But the big things that still are left to crack kind of fall. The labor market is still pretty strong. We have about 3.6% unemployment. And the Fed is working on that. The Fed is raising rates. And I'm going to go over in a second what the Fed's two main jobs are. But the Fed would like to see unemployment at 5% plus, somewhere north of 5%. So we've got a little bit of ways to go on that. One of the things that we did see in the last month labor report is that the quit rate is starting to slow down. So people are quitting their jobs a lot less and transitioning to new jobs. And I think part of that was, as we came out of COVID, people who had been working at home wanted to stay at home. And if your employer said, oh, by the way, you got to come back to the office, a lot of people said, no thanks, I quit. I'm going to find a job that has a remote work component to it. And I think most of that has happened. I was talking to some people in a call center last night. They were all back in the office, have been since May. And a lot of companies are doing that. A lot of companies are starting to go back now. The next thing that still has to crack is single-family housing. And the Fed is also working on this because, again, they're raising rates. And the single-family housing numbers are really kind of the cherry statistic in housing. And if that number really starts to drop, and it's been dropping for 5 months in a row, and it's starting the drop, the percentage of the drop is starting to pick up some steam, and that's going to be really very telling. If single-family homes stop selling, in Northern Ohio, there's been bidding wars for a lot of houses. There's been people where they would say, if you're not ready to buy a house that day, don't even look because you're not going to get the house. So if that starts to crack, then again, another sign that we're probably going into something a little bit deeper recession-wise. And I think we are headed there sometime next year. This week, the Fed did raise interest rates 75 basis points just yesterday. Uh, One of the things that happened, which was a little odd, and it's not always the right reaction, it's the first reaction, is the market really liked the move, and I'm not 100% sure why, because things got more expensive. Now, it is true that the Fed has to act now. They're a little bit late. They're the other 25% of inflation. They were late. And they were late, this is my impression. They were late because in 2021, the Biden administration was still funneling money into the economy, doing more spending, getting COVID response out there. We probably didn't need it. And so for the Fed to raise rates instead, it's like two things pushing against each other. And so they decided to wait. They shouldn't have done that. But the Fed really has two jobs. The Fed's jobs are price stability, which means 2% inflation, and full employment. And for the Fed, that means 5 to 5.5% unemployment. And the Fed waited too long to really deal with price stability. They should have been raising rates last year. And I think they know that now. And so the market kind of likes that they're getting ahead of the curve. Now, one of the things that the Fed almost inevitably tends to do is overshoot their numbers. So the mistake that they're probably going to make is they're going to take rates a little too high. And when they do that, the market will slow down even faster. And so I think you're going to see those two things, the labor market, single-family housing market, start to crack soon. And the Fed, along with excess government spending, they're probably really going to drive us into a recession, because even though it's the technical definition of a recession, there's still some things that are going right. They're just going right less. They're going right at a slower percentage. They're getting less right every day, and pretty soon I think we're going to see that the Fed is going to be successful and really kill demand, and then we are going to be in a real recession. So how do we prepare for the recession if it's going to happen? There's no guarantees that it's going to happen. I'll be very honest with you that the ideologue in me says, well, if we're going to have a recession, now's the time. There is going to be a full-scale repudiation of administration policy in the midterms. Just get it over with if we're going to have one, and we're going to have one. So how do we prepare? One other thing, too, that I firmly believe that if it was a Republican in office right now as president, the press would be having conniptions through the roof about 2 quarters in a row of negative growth. And even Brian Deese, he's an economist with the administration. He's kind of their mouthpiece. And he, like all economists, if you line them up end to end, they'd all point in a different direction. A few years ago, he said, well, the technical definition of a recession is 2 quarters of economic shrinkage consecutively. And now they're trying to redefine that and they're not going to be able to redefine it. And if you've got to explain it, you've already lost. And they're doing a lot of explaining. So how do we prepare? What do we do to get ready if there is going to be a recession? And I want to go over 7 things that I think are going to be valuable for you. Number 1, you got to fully fund your emergency fund. And if you don't have one, you got to start one. So if you don't have an emergency fund, don't get discouraged. I just want you to start, okay? Let's start from ground zero and get it in place. But an emergency fund is about 3 to 6 months of your have-to expenses set aside in a savings account that you don't use to go out to dinner. You use it for an emergency, like if you lost your job because we were in a recession and profits are down. And so to know your 3 to 6 months, you got to know your spending. You got to have a budget. So the next thing I want you to do is relook at or do a budget. And a budget is really simple. On one side, it's how much money you make. What do you bring in on a monthly basis? And on the other side, on the debit side, you can say, well, what do I spend and where do I spend it? And you got to track your expenses for a little while, maybe a month. If you're going out to dinner and you lost your job, you're not going to go out to dinner. You're going to eat at home. So when you have a budget, you could say, well, here's where I spend my money. And if times got tough and I'm dipping into my emergency fund, I'm not going to do some of these things. I'm not going to go to amusement parks or movie. I don't think people go to movies anymore, but I'm not going to go out to dinner and do things like that. I'm not going to take a trip. I don't have a job. I gotta spend the money on the things that I really need. So fully funded emergency fund, I want you to relook at or do a budget. And so you know where your money's going. So if times got tough, you knew what to cut out. Third, I want you to cut your consumer debt to zero. And that basically for me, that means credit cards. So if you run a balance on credit cards, one, you're using credit cards incorrectly. The way a credit card was really meant to be used is in lieu of cash. So I don't want to carry $1,000 with me, or I need to buy a plane ticket. You can't put cash in your computer that I know of. And so you need a credit card. If you're going to rent a car, rent a hotel room, or get a hotel room, or do a lot of things, you need a credit card. So I want you to use your credit cards, and I want you to pay off your credit cards every single month. If you are running a balance on credit cards, economic alarm bells should be going off in your head right now. Something is wrong. You're spending money you don't have. Stop it. So pay off your credit cards entirely every single month, and you'll never get into trouble with credit cards. Now, let's say something happens and you can't pay off that balance. I don't want you to feel guilty, okay? I'm not here to beat you up. I want to help you. So if you can't pay the balance off, we're not going to use the credit card until the balance is paid off. If it takes you a month, it takes you a month. If it takes you 2 months, it takes you two months. But we're going to pay that balance off. We're going to get it to zero every month and get into that habit. Number 4, I want you to keep investing. I know it's going to be hard to invest into a recession, but listen, you're buying things at a cheap price. You want to buy low and sell high. It's kind of like a stable principle in investing. Buy low, sell high. Most people buy high and sell low because we invest emotionally, but we don't do that. I don't do that. I invest. And so I want you to keep buying, keep investing in your 401k. If you've maxed your 401k or you've maxed out their match, I want you to start a Roth IRA if you're younger, a regular IRA if you're 55 and over, and keep investing. You don't need to be overly aggressive. I like dividends in recessions. I like companies that are big and there's some surety in them. But I also like to, I like to describe it as like a pizza, a badly cut pizza. So some pieces are really big. Those might be more conservative. And some pieces are really small. Remember, badly cut pizza. Those are your more aggressive pieces. You're going to take less risk there. So that's what you're going to do. What number am I on? Number 6. I think number 6. Keep investing. Oh, no, number 5. I want you, if you own a home and you've got equity in it, I want you to get a Heloc, a home equity line of credit. You don't have to use it, but it's there if you need it, and you might need it. I remember going into 2008. It didn't feel like this, and I don't think this is 2008, because banks are way more stable and way more funded. But I do think we're going into a real recession at some point. Now, it doesn't mean that the market has to do horribly, but things are going to slow down. The returns are going to be a little bit tighter. Profits are going to be a little bit less. That tends to bring returns down in the stock market. It's just a reality of where we're at. But get a Heloc. You don't have to use it. Just keep it there in case you need it. Number 6, I'm not a prepper. I don't have a bomb shelter at my house. But I do have a little food set aside just in case. And I don't think it's a bad idea to have a little bit of water, a little bit of food. I just read an article right before I came in here that there's towns in Germany where they've shut off the gas flow. There's no natural gas. People are taking cold showers. I don't think that's going to happen here. We're just so much more complex here. But Russia is starting to flex their economic might with oil and gas in Europe. That means that they're going to need more of our oil and gas in Europe. And I just like the idea of having a little bit of provision. I think in the same way that I recommend an emergency fund, I'm recommending a food emergency fund that we probably won't have to dip into it. But it's not a bad idea. And the last thing is, I get this question a lot. A lot. I can't tell you how many times I answer this question, and I answer it the same way every time, and it kind of surprises people. But they'll say, well, hey, Dave, what's your favorite precious metal? What precious metal should I be investing in? And I say, I really like brass. They're like, brass? Why? I didn't think of that. Why brass? I said, because it fits into a 9mm really good. And I would buy some guns and ammo right now. As an American citizen, I've always felt like it's almost our duty, because of the Second Amendment, to be ready when law enforcement isn't. And, one of the things that we saw in the summer of 2019 is that there were times where nobody was coming to help you. Nobody was coming to help you. You look at Portland, where a group of people took over some neighborhoods. What if you were just a regular person there who needed to go out and get milk? You couldn't do it. You needed to protect yourself and your family. And I'm not looking for vigilanteism here. I'm not recommending that. Don't put yourself in danger. But if danger comes looking for you, I want to be ready. I want you to be ready. And so I like, and by the way, they're actually guns are a pretty good investment, because you could buy a gun now and probably sell it a little bit later for a profit. Let's say you went overboard and you bought more guns than what you needed. I don't know what that number is. I haven't reached it yet. But you could use that as an investment. So I want us to be ready for a recession. I want us to be ready for anything. Again, I'm not a prepper. I'm not recommending you become a prepper. I just like the Boy Scout motto, which is always be prepared. And I want you to be prepared, and we want to be prepared. So I do think we're going into a slightly deeper recession. Doesn't mean that that we're going into another 2008. I don't see that. I don't want to scare people, but with what the Fed is doing and the direction that it's headed, a soft landing is very unlikely. It's really hard to do that for the Fed. The economy is so complex. By the time they realize something is wrong, it's too late. So be ready, be prepared. Call us if you need us. Stay in touch. Moody Radio, Thursday mornings, 8 to 9 a.m. You can email, you can call, you can Twitter. I think I've covered all my contact bases. I love you guys, and I'll see you next week.